Oh, in other words, I had seizures almost always at night. I'd wake up and feel them starting, like I'd run to my parents' room. He was the star of one of the most popular reality TV shows ever, the person who made a pawn shop in Las Vegas into a huge business. Today, though, something shocking has happened in Rick Harrison's life. Now that the sentence is over, everyone wants to know what happened to the king of board stars, to say goodbye for good. Rick Harrison was the face of the gold and silver swap shop. He was also its founder. Millions of people watched Pawn Stars to see Rick, his son Corey, and their beloved sidekick Chumley deal funny jokes and build a business out of old, dusty things. Behind the scenes, the story wasn't always so bright. Rick's journey was filled with lawsuits, family arguments, personal losses, and money problems. Now that his last sentence has been read, the curtain has come down on a man whose public image was never as simple as it seemed. How did Rick Harrison become so famous on reality TV? What happened that led to the end of his story? Rick Harrison's life was full of hard work and determination long before he became famous on TV. Rick was born in Lexington, North Carolina in 1965. He had a hard childhood. As a child, he had seizures that kept him from going to school. He had to find other ways to make a name for himself. Rick was already really into hustling by the time he was a teenager. He bought and sold things all the time, always looking for ways to make money. Together, his father Richard Oldman Harrison's discipline and his son's desire to be a business made the gold and silver pawn shop possible. It opened in Las Vegas in 1989. The pawn shop started out as just another small business in a city full of them. But Rick could see. He wanted to make the store more than just a place to get cash quickly. He wanted it to be a place people went to. With the start of Pawn Stars on the History Channel in 2009, that plan came true. Rick and his team looked at rare coins, Civil War items, classic cars, and other strange things on the show, which became a huge hit right away. Rick became well known in just 1 year. He was famous for being a tough negotiator with a sharp eye and a dry sense of humor. He also owned a pawn shop, but as the power grew, the cracks in the foundation got bigger. What was going on behind the shelves of the pawn shop? Rick got rich, famous, and praised in ways he could never have dreamed when Pawn Stars did well. The gold and silver swap shop became one of the most popular places to visit in Las Vegas, with thousands of people coming every day. Rick grew his businesses, wrote books, and even opened restaurants. But success often costs something. Things were getting tense in the family behind the scenes. His bond with his son Big Hoss, Corey, wasn't always as good as it looked on TV. There were rumors of fights over who should run the business, handle the money, and decide what the show should be about. What was even stranger was the fight that started after the old man died in 2018. It was said that Richard Harrison left most of his estate to one of his other boys to cut out. The choice caused a lot of debate and rumors of betrayal, which made the close-knit family picture that fans loved look a little less real. Also, Rick's personal life was in a lot of trouble. The polished reality TV image was worn down by divorces, lawsuits, and public fights. In real life, the man who looked untouchable on TV was facing battles on many fronts. It got worse as their fame grew, with more and more problems. Rick Harrison's kingdom was already starting to fall apart. Could he keep it together? As the fame of Pawn Stars went through the roof, Rick Harrison's name became linked to success. Lawsuits started to pile up, though, away from the bright lights of reality TV. One of the most important fights was between members of his own family. When Richard Oldman Harrison died in 2018, one of Rick's brothers said that the will had been changed unfairly, leaving him out of the fortune. The drama got out into the public eye and made Rick look like more than just a businessman. He was seen as a man who was fighting with his family. Rick was sued for things that happened at the pawn shop and for problems with his family. Some customers said the gold and silver pawn shop was dishonest, while others said their things were mishandled or not worth what they were worth. For a man whose fame came from being a fair but tough negotiator, these cases could ruin the very image that made him famous. Problems with the law didn't end at the pawn shop. In the past few years, Rick's name has come up in cases over bad business deals, property disputes, and money problems. Many of these cases were solved without a fuss, but the long list of them showed a troubling picture. The king of Pond could be beat. There were owls. So rumors of bigger scandals that couldn't be hidden with a settlement as the number of cases rose. What secrets did Rick Harrison's room hold that were just waiting to be found? Lawsuits were bad, but scandals could have brought down Rick Harrison's whole business. One issue that kept coming up was how the workers at the gold and silver pawn shop were treated. People who used to work there spoke out about the bad conditions, low pay, and stress of always having to act for TV cameras. Fans thought the shop was a funky family business, so these news came as a shock. Then there were problems with money. Rick's business efforts outside of Pawn Stars, like restaurants and partnerships, didn't always work out. Some ended in lawsuits, while others ended quietly, leaving investors and business partners to blame each other. With each failed project, Rick's image as a smart businessman was weakened. But let's not forget the fact that Chumlee is having legal problems. Even though it wasn't related to Rick, Chumlee's arrest in 2016 on drug and gun charges put a bad light on the Pawn Stars brand. Rick had to stand up for both his shop and the show's ethics. But maybe the worst thing about the scandal was that people thought Rick had lost touch with the morals he preached on TV. Fans who used to admire his good sense for deals and down-to-earth attitude started to wonder if his fame had changed him. There were more and more scandals, and even though Rick kept going on TV, the cracks in his empire were now hard to ignore. He was in a lot of trouble with the law, family fights, and problems, and one question kept coming up. How long could Rick Harrison keep his business going? Often happiness hides sadness, and in the case of Rick Harrison, tragedy was never far away. The worst blow was when his father, Richard Old Man Harrison, died in 2018. People who watched Pawn Stars loved the old man's grumpy humor, sharp wit, and straightforward attitude. For Rick, though, his dad was more than just a TV star. He taught him, worked with him, and was his moral compass. He was a big part of the gold and silver swap shop's history, and losing him was a loss for everyone. The show was missing some of its magic when the old man wasn't there, and Rick had to lead everyone by himself. He was the only one who could run the business and carry on the family name. It wasn't over with the sadness. Rick has talked about how hard it is to keep up with family bonds when you're famous. The wounds of divorce and the strained relationships with his children made him feel even more lost. In real life, the man who looked untouchable on TV was in a lot more danger. Then there were the financial disasters, business failures, lost investments, and bad relationships between partners. People thought that Rick always found gold. In private, though, he often took big risks and lost even more. In spite of the smiles, the talks, and the cameras, it was clear that Rick was a man who had been through a lot. But the worst storm was still to come, one that would make sure he would die forever. Rick Harrison's life was about to change forever because of what sentence? Rick Harrison had fights for years, in court, at work, and even with his own family. There was one last line, though, that shocked fans. This was not a judge's order to send him to jail. It was the sentence of life in prison. Rick had been through a lot of worry, trouble, and personal fights over the years. His health was getting worse, and rumors spread that he might not be able to handle the weight of the kingdom he had built anymore. The line was the last word. In order to back up, Rick Harrison did. He was giving up the pawn shop, the cameras, and the business that had shaped his life. Some people thought it was the end of an age for both Pawn Stars and the gold and silver pawn shop. Fans who had been following Rick for more than 10 years were shocked. Could the show go on without him? The shop had become famous around the world thanks to one man. Could it keep going without his steady hand? Rick felt mixed emotions about the choice. On the one hand, he had done everything he had ever dreamed of: success, wealth, and fame. On the other hand, he knew that leaving would mean giving up the personality he had built up over decades. The line was the last word. The king of Pawn Stars was coming to an end. But what happens after you say goodbye for good? As soon as word got out that Rick Harrison was leaving, there were big changes. Things started to change at the gold and silver pawn shop, which used to be a popular spot for tourists. A lot of people still came to see the popular storefront, but it wasn't the same without Rick there. The younger Harrison's son, Corey Harrison, was given more power, but fans weren't sure if he had the same charm or good negotiating skills as his dad. Even though Chumlee was very famous, he still carried the weight of his past problems. Many people were wondering if the pawn shop's image would be able to handle without its patriarch. Some longtime Pawn Stars fans thought that Rick was a big part of the show's magic. His sense of fun, his business sense, and his power to make a normal pawn shop deal into a historical moment. It wasn't just the shop that was affected. It was unclear what would happen with the show. Could Pawn Stars keep going without the person who made it? The show's producers talked about whether to change the focus to Corey and Chumlee, or whether it was time for the series to end on its own. There was also the family behind the cameras. The cracks that had been bothering Rick during his rise to power came back to the surface when he wasn't there. When the glue that held everything together suddenly disappeared, inheritance fights, business disagreements, and personal grudges got worse. Everyone in the world came to a scary discovery. The empire Rick built might fall apart faster than anyone thought if he wasn't there. But the question would still be there even if he wasn't there. What does Rick Harrison's life leave behind? Rick Harrison left behind a lot of different things. To some, he was the one who turned a small pawn shop in Las Vegas into a worldwide brand. He changed negotiations into fun things to do. Old things are turned into history lessons, and normal life is turned into must-see TV. His idea made a lot of people happy and gave the pawn shop a new level of respect in popular culture. His reputation, on the other hand, is harmed by controversy. Suits, scandals, and family fights left scars that people will talk about for a long time after he's gone. There will be doubters who remember the fights and disagreements that he had in his later years for every fan who remembers him as a smart businessman and loving son. His fame and wealth may not be the best way to judge his impact, though. The lesson of how to be strong may be. Rick Harrison showed that with determination and a clear vision, even a man from a poor background who had been sick as a child and turned down as a young businessman could build a huge company. Even though Rick's sentence is over, his story will live on in Las Vegas, on TV, and in the minds of fans who saw him turn ordinary things into amazing stories. Even though it's goodbye for good,